Some killers act out of rage. Some act out of fear. Some act because something inside them broke a long time ago and was never repaired. But then, there is a different kind. The kind that doesn't break. The kind that thinks. The kind that reads, studies, plans, and waits with the patience of someone who genuinely believes that what they are doing is right. That is the most terrifying kind. Not because of the violence. Violence alone can be understood. Violence alone can be contained within the language of crime and motive and psychology. What cannot be easily contained is conviction. What cannot be easily answered is a killer who looks you in the eye and tells you calmly that the world deserved everything he did. This story begins in a city drowning in rain. It ends in a desert under an open sky. And somewhere between those two places, two detectives walked into the most carefully constructed series of crimes either of them had ever seen. One of them was almost free. The other had everything to lose. Neither of them understood, not yet, that the man they were hunting had already studied them both. The city has no name in this story. That choice is deliberate, because this city is not meant to be a specific place. It is meant to be a feeling. It rains here constantly, the kind of rain that never fully arrives and never fully stops, that exists somewhere between weather and atmosphere. The streets are always slightly too dark. The buildings lean toward each other like people sharing secrets they're ashamed of. There is noise everywhere and genuine human connection almost nowhere. It is a city of 8 million people living in complete isolation from each other. And in that isolation, something had been growing. Not chaos, not randomness, something far more patient than either of those things. A mind had been moving through this city for years, observing it, cataloging its failures, studying the people who embodied those failures most completely, selecting them. The first sign that something was wrong came when a body was found in an apartment. The details of the scene were not what disturbed the officers who arrived first. It was the intention behind the details. Someone had arranged this. Someone had taken significant time, significant thought, and left something behind that was less a crime scene and more a statement. One word, written where it could not be missed: gluttony. Nobody understood what it meant yet, but something had begun, and whatever had begun was not going to stop on its own. There was a detective who had 7 days left, 7 days until retirement, 7 days until he could walk away from a city he had served for decades and which had given him, in return, a profound and unshakable understanding of how dark human nature could become. He was not bitter exactly. He was something more precise than bitter. He was a man who had looked clearly at the world for too long and could no longer pretend that what he saw was acceptable. His name was Somerset. He kept his apartment immaculate. He read books that most of his colleagues had never heard of. He moved through crime scenes the way a surgeon moves through a procedure, with discipline, with distance, with the particular stillness of someone who has learned that emotion, in his line of work, is a liability he cannot afford. He had requested a quiet final week. What he received was the opposite. His replacement arrived the same morning as the first body. Young, sharp, recently transferred from a smaller city with his wife, and a genuine belief that working hard enough in the right direction produced results that mattered. He had the specific energy of someone who had not yet been fully educated by the world. His name was Mills. David Mills. Somerset looked at Mills and recognized something he had once been himself, something the city had slowly and thoroughly removed from him over the years. He wasn't sure whether to feel sympathy or dread. In the end, he felt both. These two men were assigned to work together, and what they were about to step into would not leave either of them unchanged. The second body arrived before anyone had fully processed the first. A lawyer, found dead in his office. The staging, again, was deliberate. The message, again, was written for anyone with the intelligence to read it. Greed. Mills wanted to treat them as separate cases. Somerset already knew they weren't. He could feel the connective tissue between them, the shared intention, the way both scenes carried the signature of a single mind expressing a single idea across multiple locations and multiple victims. He went to the library, because Somerset was the kind of man who went to the library when the world stopped making sense. He pulled Dante. He pulled medieval theology, historical texts on sin and punishment and moral philosophy. He sat alone under fluorescent light in the middle of the night and read until the shape of it became clear. 7 deadly sins. 7 victims. Each one chosen specifically because they embodied a particular sin in their life. Each one killed in a way that reflected and amplified that sin back at them. This was not a killer working from instinct or impulse. This was a curriculum. When Somerset explained it to Mills, Mills pushed back, because Mills still believed in the kind of evil that could be processed through normal investigative logic. Somerset understood that what they were dealing with existed outside that logic entirely. The killer wasn't hiding. He was performing. And somewhere in the city, the next act was already underway. The third and fourth crimes arrived like answers to questions nobody had asked yet. Each one more elaborate than the last. Each one revealing a mind that was not panicking under the pressure of an active investigation. If anything, the awareness that detectives were now following the pattern seemed to energize rather than restrain whoever was doing this. As if an audience was precisely what had always been intended. The investigation led them to an apartment. From the outside, it was unremarkable. The kind of door that a person walks past without registering. But inside, something stopped both men the moment their eyes adjusted to the darkness. Every wall was covered, not decorated. Covered. Notebooks, fragments of writing, clippings from newspapers and books and sources that would take weeks to fully catalog. Thousands of words of handwritten thought filling every surface from floor to ceiling. A complete and internally consistent worldview, laid out in obsessive detail, built around one central argument, that the world's tolerance of human sin was not a sign of freedom or compassion, but of cowardice, of looking away, of choosing comfort over honesty. The apartment did not feel like the home of someone unstable. It felt like the study of someone terrifyingly focused. Mills stood in the center of it and felt something that he couldn't immediately name. Not fear exactly. Something closer to the feeling of realizing you are much further from shore than you thought you were, and the water around you is much deeper. Somerset felt something different. He felt recognition, not of the person, but of the endpoint. He could see where this was going. He could see the final destination taking shape, and what he saw made him want to take Mills by the arm and pull him back toward the door and keep walking. But the case wouldn't allow that, and Mills wouldn't have listened anyway. He came in from the rain, walked through the front entrance of the police precinct with his hands raised, blood visible on them, and an expression of complete composure. No panic, no desperation, no sign of a man who had just been cornered or caught or broken. He looked like a man who had arrived exactly on schedule. His name was John Doe, a name that was, of course, not a name at all, because John Doe had no name, no identity that any database contained, no history, no records, no trace of existence beyond the crimes themselves. He had removed himself from the world so completely that the only thing that confirmed he had ever existed at all was what he had left behind in those apartments, those rooms, those carefully arranged scenes. In the interrogation room, He sat across from both detectives and spoke with the measured clarity of someone delivering a prepared address to a specific audience. He was not defensive. He was not erratic. He explained his reasoning with the patience of a professor who has taught the same material many times and has learned to account for the resistance of students who are not yet ready to understand. He said the world had earned everything he had done. He said that people walk past evidence of moral collapse every single day and chose to call it normalcy. He said he was not a monster. He was a mirror. And then he told them something that made the temperature of the room change entirely. He said he wasn't finished. 2 scenes remained. 2 more scenes. And he would show them where. And he would confess to everything. And it would all be over cleanly and completely. But only if both detectives drove him to the final location themselves. No other officers. No deviation from those terms. Somerset told Mills not to go. He said it clearly, directly, with the full weight of everything he understood about where this road ended. Mills looked at him, and then Mills got in the car. The desert is everything the city is not. Open, silent, flat in all directions, the horizon unbroken, the sky pale and wide and completely indifferent to whatever happens beneath it. There is nowhere to hide out here. No crowds to absorb sound, no buildings to block sight lines, no rain to soften the edges of things. Everything is visible, everything is exposed. The 3 of them drove out into it together. John Doe in the back, directing them along roads that led further and further from anything familiar. Somerset watching him, Mills driving in silence. The kind of silence that has weight and shape and fills a space the way water fills a container, completely without gaps. They stopped, nothing around them in any direction, just dust and sky and the low, constant sound of wind. And then, in the distance, a delivery van appeared on the road. It stopped. A box was placed on the ground. The driver left without a word, without eye contact, without acknowledgement of anything that was happening. Somerset walked toward it. He already knew. Before he reached it, before he looked at it. The shape of the plan had been visible to him for days, and now, standing in the open desert with the sun behind clouds and the wind moving across the ground, the final piece of it settled into place with a quiet, terrible clarity. He walked back toward Mills, and John Doe began to speak, quietly, without rush, in the voice of a man completing something he had spent years preparing for. He told Mills what was in the box. He described it without performance, without cruelty for its own sake, in the same measured tone he had used in every conversation. He told Mills about his wife, Tracy. He told Mills about the sin he had assigned to himself. Envy. He said he envied Mills. The life Mills had. The love Mills carried. The things Mills possessed that John Doe, in all his certainty and all his mission, had never been able to build for himself. And so he had taken them. Somerset's voice behind Mills, urgent and breaking in a way that Somerset's voice had never broken before, telling him not to, telling him that this moment had been engineered from the beginning, that pulling the trigger would complete the design, would transform Mills from the detective into the final exhibit, would prove, in the most irreversible way possible, everything John Doe had ever argued about human nature, that no one is above the sins they condemn in others, that wrath lives in everyone, that given the right pressure, at the right moment, even the best of us becomes exactly what we swore we would never be. Mills fired. The desert absorbed the sound, and then there was only wind. Somerset stood in the open and watched them lead David Mills away, a young man who had arrived in this city with his wife, and his conviction and a genuine belief that justice was something you could build with enough effort and enough will. A young man who had loved fully and been loved fully in return, and who had carried that love as the most real and solid thing in his life. John Doe had found it, had reached into it with complete precision, had used it to finish what he started. This is what stays with you long after the film ends. Not the violence. Violence fades. Not the details of the crimes. Details are processed and filed and eventually received. What stays is the idea at the center of it, that John Doe didn't win because he was more dangerous than the men pursuing him. He won because he understood them. He understood that intelligence is not armor, that discipline is not armor, that even the most principled person, when pushed to the exact right place, in the exact right moment, will respond from somewhere beneath all of that. He understood that wrath doesn't ask permission, it simply arrives. Someone asked Somerset if he was going to be all right. He paused for a long moment. Then he quoted Hemingway, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." He paused again. I agree with the second part. He was 7 days from the end. He didn't leave. Not because he believed the city could be saved. Not because staying would undo what had happened in that desert. But because Somerset had long ago arrived at a specific and painful understanding that some things cannot be fixed. They can only be witnessed, carried, refused to be forgotten by the people still willing to remain. Se7en is not a story about a serial killer. It is a story about belief, about what happens when one man's absolute certainty collides with another man's absolute love, about how darkness doesn't need to overpower you. It only needs to find the one thing you cannot think clearly around, and then it waits. The box is never shown on screen. That decision, that deliberate withholding of the image, is perhaps the most honest thing the film does, because what you imagine inside it will always be more devastating than anything that could have been filmed.